And other scholars say that this word applies to every human being, that we love for humanity all the good, we love for humanity all good that we love for ourselves, we also love all of that for all of the human beings. And if you look at the practice of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, we see that his practice is closer to the second understanding of the word akhi, which means that he loved for humanity all of the good that he would love for himself. And this is one of the reasons why he called humanity, all of people, to Islam. And subhanAllah, what's interesting about this hadith, if you notice, is that the wording of the hadith is not لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لنفسه ما يحب لأخيه. It is not that no one shall attain complete faith until he loves for himself what he loves for others. He started by saying لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه. He started by saying that none of you shall attain complete faith until he loves for his brother first what he loves for himself. To emphasize that first, we have to be so connected to everyone that we are in touch with what is going on to everyone around us to determine how to be empathetic towards others. And also, an important thing to understand is that when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, حَتَّى يُحِبَّ لِأَخِيهِ مَا يُحِبُّ لِنَفْسِهِ, until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself, this means that we love for ourselves the goodness. Everything good we love for ourselves, but our nafs doesn't necessarily want good for ourselves. So, for example, our nafs will drive us to desires that may not necessarily be beneficial for us. Our nafs may make us think that we should do something because it will give us immediate pleasure, but in the long run, it will be harmful for us. So we love for our brothers what we know to be good for ourselves also, not necessarily what our nafs wants. Because if that was the case, then we would love for our brother what our own desires want, which could be harmful. So when we love for our brothers, we have to put a caveat that we only love for them what we know to be good for ourselves also. That it is bound by the concept of the sharia that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us, and that is our nafs will drive us to things that will be harmful to us, and we love for our brothers and ourselves what we know to be good and beneficial to us. Now, in order to have a good understanding of this hadith and anything in general, we should look at the opposite. So what is the opposite of this hadith? If this hadith says لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه, what is the opposite of that? The opposite is that you don't care about what your brother, or what is beneficial for your brother. That you only care about yourself, and that sometimes it may be beneficial to your brother, and sometimes it may not be beneficial to your brother. The opposite of this hadith will be centered around what you love for yourself only. What you desire for yourself only, regardless of the consequences that it has on others around you. This will be the opposite of this, the opposite understanding or meaning of this hadith. And unfortunately, if we look at the society around us, the overarching principle that we are driven to understand and to practice and to believe is the exact opposite of this hadith. When we, when we look at the society around us, it's all about survival of the fittest, right? It's all about survival of the fittest. If you look at corporate culture, the one who gets ahead is the one that is able to step on everybody else. it's all about survival of the fittest. Sometimes in corporate culture, you have two people. One person is very competent, very smart, able to do his job very well, and someone who gets ahead only by, he's eloquent. He's very smart. He's able to manipulate. He's able to convince others that he is more worthy of a raise than another person. He's able to convince people that he's able to get his work done quicker than others. And so our entire culture and our entire society trains us, unfortunately, to find ways to get ahead by thinking that it is proper to be the fittest person regardless of anybody else. And when you look at different systems that, exist today, this is the primary understanding of capitalism. Capitalism is all about survival of the fittest. When you have a market, the businesses that are going to survive are going to be the ones that are going to find ways to exploit resources more than others. Businesses that are able to manufacture things outside the U.S. at much, much cheaper rates are going to get ahead, regardless of what happens here. And so there's a funny saying that says, if you can't win the game, change the rules of the game. Okay? If you can't win in the game, change the rules of the game. So for example, if you have a factory and you're manufacturing something, whatever it is, cars. So by having a factory here in the U.S., you're employing U.S. people. You're running the economy. You're putting money in the economy. People are able to have livelihoods. Okay, but then another company comes along and says, well, if I can figure out how to manufacture this car at a much cheaper rate elsewhere, then I'll do that. So they change the rules of the game. They start to manufacture things out of the U.S. at the expense of pulling all the jobs out of the economy, all the money out of the economy, people lose their livelihoods, all of that. This is capitalism. And this is encouraged in the world that we live in. People are considered smart if they're able to find loopholes to get ahead, to make more money. So it's a very different paradigm to what we are taught in an Islamic context. And only when we start to begin to unpack all of this, we begin to understand why Islam, this different paradigm, this shift in paradigm, what has caused conflict from the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Because it upset the way that the societal rules, how society was governed. If you go to an Arabian society that was governed by tribalism, okay, and then all of a sudden you tell them that, well, everyone is equal, we have to treat others with respect regardless of what tribe they're from, that upsets the tribal system. When you start to, go into a system that it's based on, for example, interest, and then you explain to them that this goes against the paradigm of Islam. Why? Because we are taught to treat others how we ourselves would like to be treated. It goes against that system. It brings down the entire system that this whole paradigm was built upon. And so, the reason that I want to talk about the opposite paradigm, for us to understand the magnitude of the ideas of Islam and how much change it can bring about. Because if we really, really understand this hadith and how we can bring about change, it will change everything around us. People will engage in others in business dealings in a fair way, not in an unfair way. When you look at the way the economy is built here, it's not built on a fair system where everyone is treated equally. The people that have the money will have a much, much higher advantage than the people that don't have the money, or the people that are willing to put the labor they are disadvantaged because they may not have the capital. But the one who has the capital and doesn't want to put any labor is always at an advantage. But Islam puts regulations on everything so that the one that is going to bring the labor is going to be treated just like the one that's going to bring the capital. You see? So, when we begin to understand this paradigm, it becomes very attractive to those who are disenfranchised. It becomes very attractive to those who are living at the bottom and are barely making ends meet. When they begin to understand the system of Islam, it becomes very attractive. It becomes something that they see the value in because it came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, when you look at our nafs will always drive us to fulfill our desires now. When we look at our desires and what our nafs drives us to do, it will always try to find ways for us to achieve what we want now, at the expense of everything else. At the expense of everything else. Because our nafs doesn't have the long-term understanding that there is a day of judgment. Our inner nafs doesn't necessarily have the understanding that one day we will be held accountable for our deeds. Our nafs has a very short-sighted understanding of this world. It sees this world as just moments in time, and as long as I can get my pleasure in this moment in time, I'm happy. What happens after? It doesn't matter. Because there will be another moment in time where I'm going to want something else. And I will keep driving myself to get that something else until I get it, and then I'll go after the next thing, and the next thing. So our nafs, by design, is not trained to look at things long term. It is only trained to look at things very, very, very short term. And if you let your nafs take over, if you let your nafs take over your decision-making process, what will happen? You will most definitely lose the sight of the akhirah. And not just the akhirah, but long-term harm or good that may happen. I was talking to one of my friends a few days ago, and he grew up in the Midwest. And he grew up in a place where there was a lot of oil, in the U.S., and there was a lot of oil companies. So oil companies, right, in order for them to drill for oil and, go about doing all the things that they need to do, they need to make sure that the people that are making decisions would care less about the environment, right? They need to make sure that the people making the laws and making the decisions would care less about the environment, because as soon as you put somebody who cares about the environment, they'll start to limit what the oil companies can do. So they started to invest heavily in a certain party, I'm not going to mention the name, in a certain party, so that when these people come into power, they will let them do whatever they want to do. Not realizing that the long-term harm is extremely bad for all of us, for everybody, even the oil companies. Right? If you give them free rein and they destroy the environment, long-term, yeah, everyone's gonna get harmed. But the oil companies, they got their paycheck. They got their paycheck and they're gonna move on. They're like, yeah, whoever lives here next, they'll deal with the bill. That's the nafs. They got their paycheck, they're out, and then, whatever happens, happens. That's what our nafs will drive us to do. Let's say, for example, someone wants to buy a car, and there's a specific model car that they want, and they go to the dealership and they don't have the money to buy it, but they're like, yeah, but you know what? I can give you a loan. That loan is, 20% interest. Like, yeah, whatever. I just need this car. Yeah, you get it. You sign that contract. You get into that, loan, and you drive the car for maybe a couple of months, and you're super excited, but then you don't realize you just got yourself into a lot of debt. But you got your car, right? You got the car that you wanted. Okay, now it's old. Now what? Now you have a huge debt to pay. So when you look at Islam in general, Islam is all about controlling your nafs so it doesn't go haywire. So that your decision-making process doesn't go haywire and you put yourself at harm or others at harm. And so when you look at the understanding of this hadith, it's all about looking at things long-term. If you truly love for your brother what you love for yourself, there's a lot of things they probably wouldn't do. Because now your whole paradigm shift. Now there's a whole paradigm shift that changes. Now, it's not just about thinking about what your own desires want. Now you have somebody else in the picture, which is your Muslim brother or sister. Or, the society at large. If we as Muslims didn't care about our non-Muslim, neighbors, co-workers, friends, anyone, if we just lived without any regard for any of them, do you think Islam would spread anywhere? Do you think anybody would know anything about Islam? Probably not. But when we start to really think about the community, the society that we live in, and when we realize that these people, if they had the guidance of Islam, it would benefit everyone, and there's a lot of harm that would be removed from society, then we start to begin to understand the concept of Islam. And subhanAllah, when you look at the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, you realize that he was like the gold standard. He had so much care for everyone, even those that harmed him, even those that ridiculed him, even those who were the most, the harshest enemies against the Prophet ﷺ, he still cared about them. To the point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals verses where He says, "Istaghfir lahum aw la tastaghfir lahum in tastaghfir lahum 70 maratan falan yaghfir Allahu lahum." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, don't make istighfar for the munafiqeen again. I will not forgive them. He tells him, make istighfar 70 times. Or don't make istighfar, I will not forgive them. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, if I would know that I would make istighfar more than 70 times, I would do it for their forgiveness. These are the hypocrites. That's how much he cared about them. That's how much he cared about them. When you went to Ta'if, and he was kicked out of Ta'if, and he was stoned until he was bleeding, and the angel came and told him that I can fold this mountain on top of this entire village, he said no, because maybe among them, they will become Muslim. And they did become Muslim. So when you look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, you realize that he had the ultimate care for everyone around him. To the point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to relieve the actual burden that he felt, he would console him in the Quran. Like in Surah Al-Sharh, أَلَمْ نَشْرَحْ لَكَ صَدْرَكَ وَوَضَعْنَا عَنْكَ وِزْرَكَ, that we have lifted this burden on your shoulders. Because he did not like to see anyone not follow the path of Islam. Anyone, even the hypocrites, it bothered him that they did not follow the path of Islam and they were not true believers. Those that they fought in battle, those that were harsh against Muslims, everyone, the Prophet ﷺ saw as an opportunity for the Muslims to encourage them to follow the right path. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he set for us a standard of how much care we should have for everyone around us, the earth, the animals, the Muslims, the non-Muslims, everything around us. We will find in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that he had the ultimate care for everything that was around us. And right after the Prophet ﷺ, there are amazing examples in the community of the Ansar, the people of Medina. And these people of Medina, they were so special because not only, you see the hadith says, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you shall attain complete faith until you love for your brother what you love for yourself, right? The Ansar, they went beyond that. They went beyond that in the sense that they would love for their brother more than what they would love for themselves. That even like if someone was needy and was in need of something, he would give it to his Muslim brother that just immigrated to Medina at the expense of his own comfort. So they went above and beyond what this hadith actually says. And subhanAllah, this is really amazing. Again, like talking about different paradigms, right? Immigration is a huge point of debate in this country. Has any of the, political parties came out and said, why don't we welcome immigrants, give them our homes, give them our wealth, let them live among us? Everyone's like, oh, wait a minute. They're going to come take our jobs, right? But the Ansar, these people had fled Mecca. And not only did they flee Mecca, they brought all the trouble with them. Right? Quraysh attacked Medina because those people came from Mecca to live in Medina. They could have easily said, you know what? You guys are on your own. You can live with us, but you're on your own. Why participate in all of these battles? And when you look at, subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ, before he would leave Medina for battle, he would have to make shura among the companions. And so he would gather the companions, and then he would tell them, this is what I'm planning to do. What do you guys think? So obviously, the people of Mecca, they're with the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, they say, yes, we're with you. It's like, no. You sit down. I want to hear from the people of Medina. I want to hear what they say. Because we came from Mecca, and we brought our trouble with us, right? I need to make sure that they're on board also. But not once did they leave the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And they told him, they said, "Oh Prophet, we will not be like the people of Musa, who told him, go and fight by yourself. We will not be like that. We will be with you." So these Ansar, very, very, very special, because not only did they love for their brother what they love for themselves, they love for their brother more than they actually love for themselves. And you find so many amazing examples in our very rich history about how the Ansar treated the companions that had immigrated from Mecca. Okay. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, talks about this in the Quran, where He says, وَالَّذِينَ تَبَوَّأُوا الدَّارَ وَالْإِيمَانَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ يُحِبُّونَ مَنْ هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِمْ وَلَا يَجِدُونَ فِي صُدُورِهِمْ حَاجَةً مِمَّا أُوتُوا وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. And those who before them had settled in the homeland and accepted faith, this is the Ansar, they love those who immigrated to them and find no hesitation in their hearts in helping them. They give them priority over themselves, even if they themselves are needy. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obviously, because of their great, great deeds, talks about them a lot in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what's also, really amazing is Islam is all about how you control your behavior. It's all about how you treat others and how you interact with others. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a few verses in Surah Al-Baqarah where He talks about the act of giving charity. And these verses are so beautiful because it describes the etiquette of giving charity. What is the proper way to give sadaqah? And so one of these verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَنفِقُوا مِنْ طَيِّبَاتِ مَا كَسَبْتُمْ وَمِمَّا أَخْرَجْنَا لَكُمْ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ وَلَا تَيَمَّمُوا الْخَبِيثَ مِنْهُ تُنْفِقُونَ وَلَسْتُمْ بِآخِذِيهِ إِلَّا أَن تُغْمِضُوا فِيهِ وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ غَنِيٌّ حَمِيدٌ. It says, "O you who believe, spend from the good that we have given you. وَلَا تَيَمَّمُوا الْخَبِيثَ مِنْهُ تُنْفِقُونَ وَلَسْتُمْ بِآخِذِيهِ إِلَّا أَن تُغْمِضُوا فِيهِ. And do not spend from the worst that you have. So when you come give sadaqah, do not find the worst thing that you have to give sadaqah from. Give sadaqah from the thing that is the best, from the best that you have. And he says, subhanAllah, وَلَسْتُمْ بِآخِذِيهِ إِلَّا أَن تُغْمِضُوا فِيهِ. Like the description is so amazing. It says, it is almost like when you are giving from sadaqah, from your wealth, it is so embarrassing that you are closing your eyes while giving the sadaqah. So there is great emphasis on that when you give sadaqah, you don't give, like if you're going to donate clothes. If you're donate clothes, don't find the worst piece of clothes that you have to donate it. Because somebody else is going to wear it. Would you like someone to give you a piece of clothes like that to wear for yourself? Probably not. You would want that if someone were to give you some clothes to wear, it would be nice, clean, not ripped, not old, right? But when we donate, clothes or furniture or whatever, it's like, well, you know what, I'm going to throw it out in the dump, might as well donate it. That's not how we give sadaqah. That's not the proper way to give sadaqah. Because you have to understand, someone is going to receive that. When they receive that, what are they going to think of us Muslims? Oh man, these people, right? They just wait until they're about to throw it out and then they donate it. So this is exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us not to do in these verses. And another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ لَا يُتْبِعُونَ مَا أَنْفَقُوا مَنًّا وَلَا أَذًى لَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Another thing that's very important, it says, those who spend their wealth in the cause of Allah and do not follow their charity with reminders of their generosity or hurtful words. So when you give charity, you don't make the person feel like that you are being so generous to them, that you are better than them, because it will hurt their feelings. So you see how intricate and how amazing the Quran describes the etiquette of giving charity. Why? Because we always love for our brothers what we love for ourselves. We wouldn't want to be treated that way. So when you give sadaqah and you want to do a good deed, don't do it in a way that will harm others. Don't do it in a way that will embarrass others. Even when it's actually giving charity. Because again, we wouldn't want to be treated that way. If you think that, today I'm rich and you're poor, one day you're going to be poor as well. One day you may need sadaqah. If you think that today you are healthy and you're helping someone who's sick, one day you're going to be sick as well. When you go, and someone is sick and you neglect them, you don't visit them, don't expect people to visit you when you're sick. If you find people that need help and you don't help them or help them in a bad way, don't expect people to help you in a good way when you need help as well. Right? And so, when you look at the system of Islam, it is a system that is designed to make sure that everyone is treated well. The healthy person, the weak person. The wealthy person, the poor person. And when you think about the concept of zakah is that you take from the wealth of the people that have the wealth and distribute it to those who don't have the wealth. So that the wealth is equally distributed in the society. Okay. And so, one of the things that there's so many different lessons we can learn from this hadith, but we have to understand that everyone's iman goes up and down. That we will always have bad days and we will have good days. Some days we feel like, my iman is very high, is very complete, and I really am implementing this hadith very, very well. And other days, not so much. And so this hadith is telling us that we always strive to improve. We always strive to improve, to be better Muslims, to implement our faith in a better and more complete way. That is the first thing we learn from this hadith. That no one is safe from decreasing their iman. Everyone has to strive to make sure that their iman is always strong. No one is safe. One day will be like this, one day will be like that. And so if you see someone that is struggling with their iman, help them. Help them, because that's part of the meaning of this hadith. When you see someone struggling with their faith, you love for them that they increase in their faith. And so by helping them, you will also increase in your faith. And when you are struggling with your faith, if we all implement this hadith, then someone will help you. And so collectively, all of us help each other. All of us advise each other. When you find someone that is doing something that is not exactly right, we find the best way to advise them, because we care for them and we want them to improve, and we don't advise them in a way that we ourselves wouldn't accept the advice. Oftentimes you see people coming to the masjid, and we want to give them advice, but the way that we give them the advice would be unacceptable to us. So we have to be very careful. We have to put ourselves in their shoes. First time coming to the masjid, they don't want 30, 40 people telling them what to wear, what not to wear. Right? If this was my first time coming to the masjid and nobody, encouraged me to come and gave me a hug and was nice to me, I probably wouldn't come ever again. Right? So, for example, if you come to the masjid, you see somebody new, make it a point to get to know them. Because if you go to a masjid and you are a newcomer and nobody comes to introduce themselves, you're going to feel not part of the community. But if people come up to you and introduce themselves and get to know you, that's part of implementing this hadith, because we all wish for our brothers the best that we would also wish for ourselves. Okay. Now I'm sure when we, talk about this hadith, the number one thing on everyone's mind is obviously what? What's happening in Palestine? Cannot ignore that fact. As we're talking about this, the number one thing that is on everyone's mind right now is our dear brothers and sisters in Palestine. May Allah give them victory, and may Allah make the end of this a great victory for all the Muslims. SubhanAllah, one of the things that we have to understand is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by design, made everyone different. Not just different as human beings, but different in how they live this life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this in Surah Al-Nahl by saying, وَاللَّهُ فَضَّلَ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ فِي الرِّزْقِ فَمَا الَّذِينَ فُضِّلُوا بِرَادِّ رِزْقِهِمْ عَلَى مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ فَهُمْ فِيهِ سَوَاءٌ. And Allah has favored some of you over others in provision. But those who have been much favored would not share their wealth with their servants in their possession, making them their equals. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reprimanding people by saying that some of you are going to be more wealthy than others. Some of you are going to have more than others. And if you do not share that wealth with those that you have in your house, to the point that they are almost equal to you, then you have not been thankful to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. So by design, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make this world unequal. Some of us will be living in safety, and some of us will be not living in safety. Some of us will have provisions, others will not have the same provisions that we have. And the reason for that is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us opportunities to implement what it means to be a Muslim brother or sister. Because if we were all living nicely, if we were all happy and had everything that we had, there wouldn't be opportunities to help others. If all of us were healthy, there wouldn't be opportunities to help the ones that are unhealthy. If all of us were wealthy, there wouldn't be opportunities to help those who are less fortunate than us. And I think towards the end, inshallah, can it wait, or is? It could wait, but it's very relevant. Okay. If it can wait till the end, that would be better. I'm almost finished. Okay. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala you have to understand something. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always call your bluff. All right? If you claim that you are a true believer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test you to make sure that you are a true believer. If you claim that you like or you love your brothers, He will test you. He will call your bluff. And so this is the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls your bluff. He will make a situation where there are people that are suffering and is going to watch and see what you're going to do. Are you going to take these opportunities or not? Because if you don't, someone else will. Right? I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has His wisdom in everything that He does, but at the same time, there's some of these restaurants where there's a conveyor belt and there's food on it, right? Yeah, it's the same thing. So there's a conveyor belt moving along, and there's opportunities for you. You can let the conveyor belt keep going, ignore it, or every opportunity that you see, you grab it. Because again, think about those who are suffering. If they knew that there was something that you could have done to alleviate their suffering, and you didn't do it, and you're living in Sterling, Virginia, in a nice house, and you have nothing to worry about, and you didn't take the opportunity to alleviate their suffering while they're over there, they're not going to like that. There's so much that we can do that will help our brothers, and we need to take all the opportunities that we have so that at the end of the day, when we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say, yes, oh Allah, I did what I could do. Because they will also be standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they will say, oh Allah, we called on the Muslims. We asked the Muslims for help. We cried out. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come to us and say, what did you do about it? Right? Yeah, did you hear their cries for help? Yes, we did hear their cries for help. So what did you do about it? And so, when you look at these calamities, yes, they are definitely calamities, but there is so much khair that can come from them because we have so much opportunity to do good. We have so much opportunity to help and to do good, and these are mechanisms Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends our way to see if we really truly understand what it means to love for our brother what we love for ourselves. Just a few more closing points. Another thing that's really important here in the U.S. is that we have a tremendous opportunity for da'wah. If we truly understand this hadith and implement this hadith, people will see Islam for what it actually is. If we embody this character in everything that we do, we have an opportunity to show people what Islam truly is about. That it's not about following your desires until you destroy the world. It's not about following your desires until you get what you want and everyone else doesn't get anything. It's not about stepping over people. It's not about getting ahead at the expense of others. No. This is not what Islam is about. Islam is a system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in place that gives everyone equal opportunity. That is put in place so that everyone is treated fairly. And just like, the Prophet ﷺ, like I mentioned earlier, that he was like the gold standard, the Prophet ﷺ not only cared about the Muslims, he cared about the kuffar, he cared about the munafiqeen, and he cared about the people that he didn't even see, the people he didn't meet, by saving that one dua on the Day of Judgment for shafa'ah. That's how much he cared about us, who he never even saw. And when you look at, our role here in the U.S., by working with our institutes and da'wah and improving the situation that we are in, we are building the future for people that we may not meet. We are building the future for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, who we may never see. But because we have the foresight of doing it, we do it because we have the long-term understanding and the vision of what it means to love for our brother, what we love for ourselves. I think with that, we can open the floor for questions and answers. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's an excellent question. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Right, right. Yeah, those are two actually very, very, very good questions. May Allah bless you. Those are two very important questions. The first question is, because of the situation of the people in Gaza and what they're going through, people are going to feel guilty about living a comfortable life here. Like, you know, at the end of the day, you know, I want to buy a car, for example. Okay, well, can I go and buy a nice car, or do I have to live with, you know, a cheap car and then, you know, maybe the rest of the money donated or something else, right? Like, where do we draw the line? So, you see, subhanAllah, there are two very important things that we have to understand. First is that Islam and Muslims, if we were all poor, we would never be able to help anybody else, right? So we need people, we need Muslims that are strong, financially independent Muslims that we can rely on them for help when we need donations or whatever the case is. So when you look at the companions had very different understandings of Islam, and the Prophet ﷺ, he would give them advice based on their own understanding of Islam. So for example, Abu Dharr al-Ghafari, his understanding of Islam was that you cannot benefit from this dunya at all. His understanding was you live on the ground. Okay? Like, no reason to get a bed, because to him, this dunya is not about comfort. I'm here temporarily, I'm going to leave soon. Okay? And so when he would come to the companions who actually lived comfortably, he would reprimand them. And he'd say, why do you have this? This is dunya, why? Right? And the Prophet ﷺ would tell him, he says, your understanding of Islam does not apply to everybody else. Right? Like, don't expect everyone to live like you. Some people have the strength to live like you, but don't take that rule and apply it to everybody else. Okay? Because at the end of the day, if all of us, for example, what's happening in Gaza, if all of us took all our wealth and donated it, what's going to happen? We're going to have a huge problem, because then, you know, we are not going to have strong Muslims here that have good financial independence that in a couple of years' time are going to be able to support our institutes. Right? So, yes, we understand that there is a calamity in Gaza, but we have to be balanced in our approach, because, you know, like for example, like you mentioned the car, a good example, right? So I need to get a car, and if I go get a $1,000 car, it's going to break down, and I'm not going to be able to go to my job. Okay, well, that's not going to help me.
Yeah, but brother, I'm not, like, there's a difference between, like, buying a car that is sturdy and will get you from A to B, and then a luxury car. Same thing.
Right. No, I'm going to get there.
The comfort is different.
I agree with you. Yeah. So again, I'm just building the framework. Building the framework, right? Okay. Now, at the same time, there is a point when our understanding of what we spend ourselves goes beyond what we need to live comfortably and to support our brothers. So, you know, like you said, you can go and get a nice car that will survive, that can take you from point A to point B, and it works fine, and you're able to do your job and all of this stuff. And then there's another car that you can buy that will do the same exact thing, but it's like, you know, $50,000 more. And so in that case, if there's an opportunity, and this is not a rule, this is not a fiqhi opinion, okay, it's not a fiqhi opinion, but a smart person a smart person would take that money and would do something with it that will help him in the akhirah. Because ultimately, this dunya is gonna go like this. And that Tesla that you got that is so nice and comfortable, and it's gonna get old after 3 months, and you're gonna realize that it does the same thing as every other car. I mean, yeah, it's electric, you can get other electric cars, I guess, but the point is that just because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's an understanding, and it's not a wrong understanding, but there's an understanding in our community that as long as you pay zakah, your money is halal, you can do whatever you want with it. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects from you is to pay your 2.5%, and that's it. And after that, you can do whatever you want as long as you don't buy something haram. Technically, that is correct, but it's now up to you how much you want to save for your akhirah. So yeah, you can take your money and spend all of it on things of this dunya and enjoy your dunya, but when you come to the akhirah, you're going to find that you're way behind. Right? So a smart person would look at what you need in terms of function and use the rest of their wealth to benefit themselves in the hereafter. And there is a concept of israf in Islam. I have to, be very clear. In Islam, there is something called israf. And that's a huge fiqh discussion that, I don't want to get into right now. But in Islam, there is israf, which means being wasteful with your money. There is that concept, and it is haram. In Islam, israf is haram. And, if you go and research what israf is, there's a lot of, fiqh discussions, about it. But there may be some things that you will be held accountable for because it will fall under israf. If you go overboard and do all of this stuff while people are suffering and they could actually use this money to benefit them for whatever case, it may fall under the category of israf. I don't know if I answered properly. Yeah, I mean, so you're absolutely right. There's a balance, but you have to be careful, right? Because your nafs is driving you to go towards the other side. Like you have to be really, really, really careful when you make decisions, because you have to ask yourself, truly, am I being balanced in how I'm living my life, or is my nafs driving me to go out this way, And that's just the way our nafs is. So we have to constantly train ourselves to really look at things for what we're going to use them for, versus like necessities versus good to have, and so yes, there is obviously that part of it, but again, you have to be extremely careful when you start to indulge in this dunya. The second question, which is also very, very important, is about helping others, and when does it come? When it becomes a burden if that person that you're helping is not willing to help themselves, right? So, in Islam, when we give sadaqah, there are different things, or there are priorities when we give sadaqah. Okay? So, when the highest priority, like the word faqir, anyone know the root of this word? It comes from faqara, okay, which is your backbone, which is your part of your backbone. Okay, and the meaning of it is that he is not able to straighten his back. Okay, which means that he's so poor that he doesn't have the means to walk straight. So he's not able he's either not able to find income to feed himself. So when you think about sadaqah, the main purpose of sadaqah or zakah, number one, is that when people are so hungry, they will not be able to think freely. Okay? Right? When someone is under so much poverty, they can easily be manipulated to think certain ways. So in Islam, you alleviate that level of poverty so that people as humans, as part of, living as a dignified human being, is to be able to make your own choices, not having to make choices based on the poverty that you live in. So if you find someone like that is so poor that he's not able to do he's not able to think freely, or he's in such a state of poverty that he's not able to do anything, then that person obviously deserves sadaqah. The second thing is that it is much more important that you find systems that remove people from the cycle of poverty. So it's, if you have capital and you have a mechanism, like the saying, if you teach a person to fish, you feed him for his life. If you give him a fish, you'll feed him for a day. You know the saying, right? So this is actually in Islam, that you find mechanisms to remove people from poverty and not just give them the food that they need at that moment so that they're good, and then the next day they'll also need food. This doesn't apply to the people that are like I said, the first category. Okay? If someone has they're able to feed themselves, they're able to work, and they're able to live and whatnot, but they need financial help, right? The better way to give them help is to teach them something they can do, give them a job, whatever the case is, so they help themselves. So that they don't become just reliant on people giving them sadaqah, because they will never get out of that cycle. They'll never get out of that cycle, because when you look at the capital that Muslims have, the concept of having like a Baytul Mal or a bank that has the capital is not for it to get depleted just because people are constantly taking sadaqah from it. The concept of it is for it to grow and to benefit others by establishing systems that if someone is physically able to work, that they're able to work and able to produce, and they can help themselves. So if someone is just taking advantage of the system and is just there because people are nice and people are generous and people are just, willing to give them sadaqah, there are other people that are more worthy of that sadaqah than that person. And obviously if there's, the problem is that if someone goes and works, there's effort involved. If they find that if they sit at home and get sadaqah from someone, there's no effort involved. So if they're trained to constantly receive sadaqah from us, they'll never want to get a job, because getting a job is going to require work. But then it's going to deplete our resources for people to actually, go and people actually deserve that sadaqah because either they're able, or they can't find jobs, or whatever the case may be. So I hope did I answer the second? So, yeah, so the question is, sometimes we struggle with people that aren't willing to help themselves, and then we feel bad for them because they're our close friends and so on, right? So I think one part of the thing is, whenever you are confronted with a situation where you're asked to help someone, I think the first thing that you should do is to first understand why that person needs help. Because you don't want to be in a situation where you end up, by helping them, you become their crutch, right? Because if they realize, like, for example, if someone calls you on the day before the month is over and says, my rent is due and I don't have rent, okay? So you help him the first time, you help him cover his rent, okay? But you didn't actually see what the actual root of the problem is. So what's going to happen the next month? He's going to call you again, and he's like, my rent is due, right? Maybe that person, the help that he needs is to manage his finances properly. Maybe he needs to organize his time better. Maybe he's lazy. Maybe, So, it's obviously it's a case-by-case basis, right? But ultimately, I think when it comes to helping others, try to understand what they actually need help in. It could be that they're not organized, they don't have opportunity, whatever the case is. If someone's just pure lazy, they need to learn how to work. But you just paying their bills or helping them out is never going to get them out of that mode of being lazy. Any other questions or comments? I don't know how much time we have, but I think. Oh, okay. Yes. Very good question. So the question is, given the situation in Gaza right now, what is an appropriate thing that we can do to help? Regardless, obviously, we're all donating and doing as much as we can with the wealth Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has entrusted us with. But is there something more that we can do, or what is going to be required of us? Is that a better way to? Yeah. Okay. So I think ultimately we have to understand that what's happening in Gaza right now. And I'm very sorry to say this, but it's so bad because we as an ummah have been neglectful of our ummah. It wouldn't have gotten this bad if as an ummah we weren't as neglectful. So first thing is, this is a great lesson for us of what happens when the ummah, the entire ummah, becomes neglectful. Where we are so in our bubble that we really don't understand and don't feel for the ummah around us. This conflict is not something that started a couple of months ago. It's been going on for, almost 80 years. Like 3 generations of people have been suffering. And it was only until now that the entire ummah woke up. But it took such severe, calamities to wake up the entire ummah. We should have been awake like we are now 80 years ago. Okay? So the first lesson for us is we as an ummah have to always be awake like we are now. Because today it's Gaza, and I don't know if you are following, but there's so much going on in India. The situation in India with the Muslims is very, very, very bad. They're taking advantage of what's happening in Gaza to do all kinds of things in India, in Kashmir, right? In China, in Sudan. So there's so many calamities around the world that are happening, but we just happen to be focused on Gaza. So the first thing is that we have to be constantly connected with our brothers and sisters all over the world. And that means that you know what's going on. You read the news, you talk to people, you engage, if there is awareness that we can do as a community, right? Not just about Gaza, but about the entire ummah. Whatever, like if there's events that we can hold to bring awareness to these issues. The second thing is that in America, we do have a mechanism to affect change, which is obviously the voting system, right? This is the mechanism that we have to affect change. Now, there's a whole other discussion about the political system in America that we're not going to get into, okay? But the bottom line is, there was a suggestion that I thought was actually really, really good, right? In the elections, people, present themselves for voting. Vote for me, this is my platform. As a Muslim community, one of our biggest problems is that we don't do proper research about all the candidates that come and, that we interact with. And so just because a candidate comes now, right, and says, I'm calling for this, and you're like, oh wow, he's a great candidate. Okay? As a Muslim community, we have to be a lot more mature than that by going and looking at every issue that this candidate voted on. Look at his history. That's what other communities do, by the way. Before someone comes and speaks to you or engages with you, other communities do. They go and have a complete research profile about every issue that this person has voted on, and they ask him. So on this date, this happened and you voted yes, no, explain yourself. On this date, this happened and you voted yes, please explain yourself. We as a Muslim community are not there yet. We're just like, oh, mashallah, he's a great candidate, he said some great words, I'm going to vote for him. And so what happens is candidates, when they come to us, they just know how to get our vote. Just say Assalamu alaikum, say a few great things, and we'll get our vote. Regardless of who this person is, what they stand for, what the history of what they... Right? So number two is, if you want to be engaged in the system that we live in, make sure that you are engaged, or you are an informed citizen about all of these issues. All the people in Congress, who put them there? It was the American public. All the people in Senate, who put them there? It was the American public. Nobody came and said, this person's going to be a senator, right? So we do have an opportunity to change, but if we actually want to change, we have to be very informed when we approach our political candidates. Okay? And that means that if you know someone is coming, or you know someone is running on the ballot, go and do your research. And there are, subhanAllah, I'm surprised that there isn't a centralized location, like a website that has all this information, but it would be nice to have, like, you put in somebody's name and they give you, like, other communities do that. Other communities go and there's like a 30, 40 page thing, and it shows you where they stand on all these issues. So number two is be an informed citizen to actually bring about, positive change. The thing is that, this is number three, is that unfortunately, as Muslims, we have very, very short-term memory. So, what's happening in Gaza, may Allah protect our brothers there, it will be over, or something will happen, and probably in the next couple of months, things will change, maybe there'll be a ceasefire, but we hope, right? And then we have short-term memory, and then we forget. And then the next conflict comes, and then, we as Muslims, we don't have long-term memory. And unfortunately, the occupiers, they rely on the fact that we have short-term memory. They know November time comes, that is, what happened in Gaza was many months ago, people have already forgotten. Okay? So keep the issue alive. Don't have short-term memory, keep the issue always alive. And subhanAllah, I made a khutbah about this. If some of you remember, there was a time when in Masjid al-Aqsa, so if you know what's happening there, is Jordan is the guardian of Masjid al-Aqsa, right? According to international law, Jordan controls the Masjid al-Aqsa. So by international law, the Israeli government, they have no right to limit visitors to Masjid al-Aqsa because they are not the guardians of Masjid al-Aqsa, by law. So they added some type of metal detectors at the entrance of the Masjid al-Aqsa. And people in Palestine rose up, like, no, you cannot do this. And there was protests for about 2-3 weeks until they removed, what happened, okay? But after that, the issue just died away. It was like everything was back to normal, even though the issue didn't die away, but we just, we were just very, like, energetic the first 2-3 weeks, and after that, it was like, yeah, okay, So, people know this. People know that we have short-term memory. It's like, yeah, they'll be very upset for the first 2-3 weeks, and then after that, we just go about our lives and we forget that even happened. Even when they during the last president, he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. And again, people were like, first 3 weeks, everybody's energetic, this kind of, and then what happened? The issue people don't even know that this happened. So keep the issue always alive, as much as you can, in your families, your friends. Don't ever let this issue die away. Our brothers and sisters, don't forget about them. Not just people in Gaza, people all over, our Muslims and Muslims all over the world. Always keep the issue alive, so that we don't have short-term memory. I think the last thing, number 4, is that, and I guess it goes back to what you said, is if you begin to really understand, our life compared to other people's lives, and you begin to understand how much we actually have as Americans here, and how fortunate we are. Try your best to live a life of balance. Meaning, for example, when you go visit the Middle East, okay, most people in the Middle East, they're not able to afford meat every single day. Am I right? Most people in the Middle East, only very, very, very few people eat meat every single day. Most people, they eat meat once a week, sometimes once a month, and sometimes there are people that will only taste meat on Eid al-Adha. This is the reality. Okay? So here, in the US, try to train yourself not to eat meat every single day. You don't need to do that. You can live perfectly fine without eating meat every single day. Okay? I'm not saying to live like a poor life, but you don't eat, I'm sorry? Oh yeah, of course. I mean, we don't have to go into the, okay? So the thing is, we have developed a certain life standard that we can't go below. And this is the definition of engulfing yourself in this dunya, where you can't get yourself to live a life that's below the standard. When the vast majority of people live life like that, like if your wife makes you dinner one day and it doesn't have meat in it, it's okay. People don't have to have meat every single day. Some people get really upset if they don't have 2 kinds of meat every day. 2 different dishes. When you have a gathering and you're inviting people over, you have to have this massive table spread. That's not necessary. The more that you feel for your brothers, the more you start to completely rethink how you live your life. So all of that is part of being closer to your brothers and sisters. Because here's the important thing. There's a really interesting hadith about exactly what is happening now. Exactly what's happening. Where this hadith starts by saying that a day will come when all of these nations will come and eat from the Muslim ummah. And the companions, they asked the Prophet ﷺ, is it because we're few in numbers? Like, no, you are great in number. Okay? And the companions say, well, what's the cause of this? And the Prophet ﷺ says, حُبُّ الدُّنْيَا وَكَرَاهِيَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Those are the 2 things that will bring the ummah to its knees. So when you have that standard of living, you will do everything you can to not bring that standard any lower. Okay? Which means, what does that mean? That means that if I speak out against Palestine, I might lose my job. Oh no, I can't afford that. No, because I have to live in a certain house. If I do this, then I'm gonna start to lose my income, which is gonna prevent me from having that standard of life, and that's gonna control you. So the more that you train yourself to control the dunya versus the dunya controlling you, then you can actually help your brothers and sisters. But the whole time that you are expecting to live a certain standard, the dunya has already controlled you, right? Like you're already so controlled by the dunya that you can't even control yourself to say, I don't want to have meat every single day, right? Of course, yeah. I mean, it's, when you think about the political climate and all of these things, you have to understand something. I'm sorry, I think I don't know. You have to understand something. That there is a cost. There will always be a cost for speaking the truth. If there isn't a cost, then something is wrong. Okay, but there will always be a cost for speaking the truth. And people shy away from speaking the truth or engaging or talking, mainly because they have a certain life standard that they don't want to give up. And that's why we are where we are today. That's why I started by saying we are a neglectful ummah. We have neglected these issues for 80 years because we live comfortably, and we decided to basically live, life like this, and not actually engage, and not give up what we have, And so because of that, we have to wake up, and this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mechanism of waking us up. I hope I... Good question, yeah. That's a very good question. So the question is, I want to make sure that I did my best when I meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So I think, as Muslims, we have to be obviously, we always come back to balance, So one thing that's really important is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows you more than you know yourself, right? So when it comes, and so why I'm saying this is this overarching principle applies to everything that you do. Because, for example, if you come to donate, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that you can donate a little more. He knows, but you tell yourself, oh, this is all that I can afford right now. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that no, there is still more that you could have donated, right? So always listen to your good conscience when it comes to doing anything good for helping our brothers and sisters. If for example, there's a announcement, you need to call your senators, and you call them once and you call them twice, and then you say, you know what? I don't have any more time. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that you do have more time. You see? So every time there's an opportunity, you have to really ask yourself, really truly, am I making an excuse or do I really don't have time? Whatever the case is, whether it's anything that you can do that can help them. So don't make excuses, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, is this a valid excuse or not? Because we all like to make excuses. Shaitan comes to you and Shaitan ya'adukum al-faqr. He says, oh, you're going to be poor if you do this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that no, it's within your ability. And so every opportunity that you have, take advantage of it, in the hopes that on the Day of Judgment that you would have done your best, and try your best to really think about the excuses that you are making to yourself. If you really think about them, you will find that a good percentage of them are not real excuses. Whether it's making phone calls, whether it's donating, whether it's volunteering, do as much as you can in the ability that you have. And the other important thing is that one of the things that's it causes is a source of depression, is that we think we're powerless. What can I do? I live here. Maybe especially for teenagers. Don't underestimate your own power, right? Because the ummah can change. The ummah can change overnight if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees that we are worthy of that change. If He sees that we have waken up as an ummah, then the situation will change. But if we're still sleeping, it will just be like this until we wake up. So don't think that you have done your part and then khalas, the rest is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then we'll just do as much as you can. Always strive to do as much as you can. Yeah, okay. Other questions? Okay. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.